The Mustard Seed Media video podcast is sponsored and created by Mustard Seed Media, Inc., creating and developing media and web for tomorrow's Christian ministries. On the web at mustardseedmedia.com.
Okay, so let's open up Drupal.org and let's do a little CMS magic. Okay, so let's start with this Photoshop document here, and let's turn this thing into a website. Let's get right down to it and edit some CSS, shall we? Welcome to the Mustard Seed Media video podcast. My name is Bob, and this is the podcast for Drupal web designers. Over the last couple weeks, and actually over the last couple months, I've gotten the same question over and over from people who watch the podcast. I've been asking, what do you want me to talk about? And everybody wants the same thing, so I'm going to address it today, but maybe not quite in the way that you're looking for. Hopefully it'll definitely help you out, and you'll figure this whole thing out. But today when I talk about views theming, I'm going to talk much more philosophically than I am actually nuts and bolts of how to do stuff. The reason is because when people ask, how do I theme a view? What is views theming? I think a lot of times they misunderstand what views theming is. They misunderstand how to use it, when to use it, things like that, and it causes some mental problems of really understanding how to use this this concept, and I think that's more of a problem than how to actually do it. So I'm going to go back and forth today talking about philosophy and then showing you how to actually do it, and I'll give a quick, easy example of how to do it. So let's jump in, just look at the view I built first, and I'm going to sort of come back and forth as I talk about views theming a little bit here. So the first thing we're going to look at is just the fact that I've built a view here. It's just sort of an image gallery, and it's just a simple view with image nodes that have an image, and this is actually the image title. So let's take a look at that view. It's called Dog Gallery, but that's from a previous screencast, so just ignore that part. But all we're looking at here is we have built this view. We're showing a bunch of stuff in a grid. We're showing the row style as fields. And we're showing, as you can see here, the photo and the title. Now here's the important thing to note. The first thing when we talk about when to use views theming, specifically views theming, is what's our row style? Let's look at the options for row style. We basically have two choices, field or node. So let's talk about that for a minute. This is really our first question, and the answer, the easy answer here is you use views theming when you're using fields, not when you choose node there. When you choose node there, what you're doing is saying, use my general node template files, which would be basically themed and laid out in your node.tpl.php. So if this content type was called image, we would have a node-image.tpl.php, and in there we would define what a teaser looks like and what a full node looks like. When we choose node in views, it's going to use that template. You're not going to use views theming in that case. You're going to use basic, regular Drupal theming. So that's the first thing to know, is that when you choose either fields or node, you're only going to use quote-unquote views theming when you choose fields. So we're going to choose fields. And now that we've chosen fields, we basically can choose what type of layout it is. So in here we have grid, we have list, we have table, we have unformatted. All of that stuff is just fine when you choose how this stuff should be styled. You can choose any of those with views theming. To use views theming particularly, we want fields. So now that we've laid this out, let's talk about actually theming this view. Let's talk about what views theming is not real quick once again. Views theming does not have anything to do with things like color, text, anything that's style oriented. It gets a little confusing because when you say theming, you think style, right? You think, oh, I want something blue, or I want to use Helvetica as the text, or any of that stuff that's done in CSS. Views theming has nothing to do with CSS, so don't get confused. All views theming is doing is affecting the HTML markup that views wraps your content in, or which content it spits out, or exactly how it spits out. So it has much more to do with the actual HTML content that's spit out than it does to the actual styling. Now, if you need to do some styling, say there's a div that's views spitting out, but you want to add a class to it, or you want to add a CSS ID to it, or something like that, you would use views theming to do that, to add those classes and IDs. But the actual theming of how it looks itself, remember, is always done in CSS. Okay, so let's go back and look at this, and let's look at how to create a views themed item, or a views themed template. So once we have our stuff set out, laid out how we want it to be, we're going to go down to theme information. Now, by clicking this, we're only getting information. That's all this section's for. It's not actually doing anything. You're not doing any settings. You're not really choosing anything. So let's look at this content. And this is all the information for our theming. Now, we have different levels of theming. So we can theme the entire output, you know, so either the display or the style. Say we want to just theme the grid or something like that. We can use those. We can theme a whole row. So each item that's outputted, each piece of the view that's output, we can style that row. We can style individual fields in the row. And that's what we're going to do today. So we have all these options of different levels that we can theme at. How high level, how low level do we want to be theming? So what we're going to do today is we're actually just going to theme this title. If we go back and look, and we actually look at the HTML for these titles, we'll notice that it's just spitting out a title. And yes, it's wrapped in this span called field content and things like that. But let's change that. Let's say we want that title to be an H2. Let's say we want it to be wrapped in an H2. That's what we're going to do today. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our field content, and we're going to find, basically underneath here, these are all suggestions or recommendations of what you could name all your different template files. And they go from very specific to very general. So right now, and the bold one is what it's using. Right now for this field, it's using a template called views viewfield.tpl.php that exists in the views module. So we can define some of these other custom fields. So we're going to work on the title field. And you really have to read all these because they all affect different things. You can affect the whole view. You can affect just that display of the view. You can affect all kinds of different stuff with these. So you have to choose your template wisely when you choose your name here. So we're going to use something called views view field dog gallery title. That'll affect just my dog gallery view, which is not really dogs again, and just the title. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to copy that name. Then I'm going to go to my theme folder. I'm going to create a new file with that exact name. Then I'll open that file. Now, what do we put in that? Good question. First thing you want to do is you want to click on this field. So you click on the master type of field, and it's going to give you the basic template for this type of field. So I'm going to copy that template. I'm going to paste it into my file that I just made, and then I'm going to say OK. Now at this point, it's not seeing my new file. What we have to do is go back to theme information and click this button that says rescan template files. And what you're going to see is it's going to move from this default template to my template because it's going to find it. And there we go. So it's now found my template file. I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to save this view. Now right now, if we refresh, it's basically going to do the exact same thing as it was doing before because all we did was paste in the same code. All we're going to do, like I said, is we're going to wrap that title in an H2. So let's wrap our output in an H2, save it, refresh, and these are now H2s. So what we've done is we've changed the markup of just this row. Now notice up here there's a bunch of different variables you can use. In the past we've talked about print R. You can look to see what's in those variables. So you can make use of all of this data in your layout too, and you can go crazy. You're not just limited to using output. You can really break things down, change the markup, do all kinds of stuff that you want to do. So that's the basics of views theming. Don't forget that all you're doing is on any view where you choose to use fields instead of nodes as your output, you are just being able to change some of the HTML to alter some of the content in that row or in that view or in sort of whatever level you want. If you have questions on any of this, hit me up over at mustardseedmedia.com/podcast, and hopefully it was helpful. And also go check out my audio podcast over at geeksandgod.com. Until next week, have a good one.